Is Benimaru really the strongest captain in Fire Force? That's what his reputation says, but you also have the raw power of Burns, and if we're counting all of the original captains, Giovanni is actually a lot stronger than you think. Plus, if you read the manga, then you know that Burns technically doesn't have a limit to his power. On top of that, you also have a bunch of other captains that, while they have used their powers against Infernals, haven't actually fought each other. That's why in this video, I'm going to analyze the powers of all 8 of the original captains from Season 1, rank each of them from weakest to strongest, and decide who the strongest captain in Fire Force really is. Just be warned that this video will contain major spoilers. Now, captains are kind of an interesting role in Fire Force compared to other anime. For example, in Bleach, you usually need to achieve a Bankai. So if you're a captain, then it's implied that you have a certain level of power. The same would be true for a series like Black Clover. But that's not how it works in Fire Force. In Fire Force, a captain isn't necessarily the strongest member of a Fire Force company. The captain is just the team leader. For example, when Company 8 was created, Obi was made captain because he was the one that was given the mission to investigate the other companies. He isn't the strongest on the team. He's just the one that organizes and leads the company. The same is true for Kyoko in Company 6. It's never implied that she's the strongest member of that company. She just has that position simply because she's the lead doctor at the hospital run by Company 6. What I'm getting at is that as we work our way through each of the companies, just keep in mind that not all of the captains are in the same threshold power-wise. That being said, this list was not as straightforward to put together as you might think. A lot of the captains are actually some of the more unexplored characters in Fire Force. So considering they all have completely different powers and backgrounds, it was a lot of fun to imagine how they would face off against each other. Let me just point out that for the purposes of this video, we are also assuming that they have all the powers and abilities we've seen them with by the end of the series. On that note, starting from the bottom of the list, we have Captain Kyoko. Now, this was actually kind of surprising for me because I kind of just assumed Hibana would be at the bottom since she lost to Shinra early in the story, but when you look at Kyoko's feats, well, that's just it. She doesn't really have any feats. Like I said before, Kyoko is the head doctor at the hospital run by Company 6, meaning she is the captain of Company 6. Now, as a captain, it's assumed she can handle herself in a fight. On top of that, she's also a 3rd generation, so she does have the advantage of not needing an external fire to use her powers. But the problem is that her power doesn't translate into one-on-one combat. Kyoko's ability allows her to boost the regeneration of someone else, and she can even use the internal flame of 3rd generation users to boost her ability. But that's it. She can't use this ability to deal damage, at least not that we've seen. So considering she also doesn't have any meaningful feats, we can only assume she would lose to someone like Hibana who can actually deal some serious damage. Speaking of which, let's move on to the number 7 spot. Actually, real quick before I do that, make sure to become a channel member if you're enjoying the video so far. You can get custom badges and emojis that you can use in our weekly live streams, and you can pick which series I cover next. Now, at number 7, we have Captain Hibana. Hibana is a 3rd generation pyrokinetic and the captain of Company 5, which is under the influence of Haijima Industries. As a result, Company 5 is mainly designed to deal with scientific investigations, such as experimenting on captured infernals. And Hibana is in the perfect position to be the captain of this company considering her background. Ever since she lost her sisters at the church, she's dedicated herself to finding the source of infernals. As a result, Hibana has a strong scientific drive that has given her an exceptional intellect as well as incredible analyzation skills. In fights, this means she can immediately analyze an enemy's combat profile and devise an appropriate plan. This also leads her to use her 3rd generation abilities in unconventional ways, such as overheating her enemies in order to slow their blood flow and cause dizziness. On the other hand, this is more or less the extent of her abilities. While Hibana is a captain and more than capable of fighting infernals, She's never demonstrated any hand-to-hand combat skills, and as seen in her fight with Shinra, doesn't really have any real durability. So in terms of a one-on-one fight, while Hibana could probably stand up against most Fire Force soldiers, her lack of traditional combat skills and durability means she would only be able to endure a few major attacks. Speaking of which, now let's talk about a captain that would be a terrible matchup for Hibana. At number 6, we have Captain Honda. Honda is the captain of Company 2, the company closest to the military. As you can imagine, Honda is an intense character who prides himself on tough training and self-discipline. When he's not on official business, he can be seen training by holding his head in the ceiling and then practicing his signature headbutt against the floor. And I call it signature, but at the same time, it's also his only attack. Honda is a third-generation pyrokinetic, but all we know is that his ability engulfs his head in fire and allows him to use super-powered headbutts. Besides that, we haven't seen him demonstrate any other serious combat abilities. In fact, all of his fights consist of Honda one-shotting his enemy, usually by surprise, and in most cases, this tends to be a one-hit KO, even against the strongest Infernals. Naturally, characters like Kyoko and Hibana would probably lose to Honda in a one-on-one fight. While they might be able to deal some damage, his headbutt is so powerful that any damage would likely crush them in one hit. That being said, this is also why Honda is only at number 6. Honda's headbutt is a high reward but very high risk attack. The enemy has to endure a devastating amount of damage. But if it misses, Honda has to spend at least a few seconds repositioning himself, and in the worst case, might even get stuck until he can free his head. Considering the strength and durability of Captain Obi, he would likely be able to tank a few of Honda's attacks before responding with lethal damage. And obviously, characters like Benimaru and even Haig would be fast enough to dodge Honda once they can gauge the speed of his headbutt. For that reason, Honda only comes in one spot above Hibana. But moving on to number 5, we have the captain of Company 4, Soichiro Haig. Like Burns, Haig is a veteran member of the Fire Force. In the past, he withstood an attack from an Infernal that left him with 3 long scars across his face. This also placed him in the small list of characters who have an Adela Link but no Adela Burst. In fact, Captain Haig never demonstrated any pyrokinetic abilities. Whether he has abilities or not is never confirmed, but as shown in his fights, he's more than capable with the tools of the Fire Force. On top of that, Haig has high durability, as he literally has to beg opponents to deal damage that he considers worthy of an Adela Link. This is why Haig would likely defeat Honda in a one-on-one fight, because while Honda is capable of devastating damage, Haig has a wider range of different tools to stop Honda after he attacks, and has such an insane level of durability that even one of Honda's headbutts wouldn't be able to stop him. Meanwhile, in a one-on-one fight, Haig would probably have a much harder time fighting against the other captains on this list with exceptional abilities and fighting experience. In fact, there's one captain that, while it would be close, Haig would probably lose to in a battle of durability. Of course, coming in at number 4, that captain would be Obi. As we know, Obi is an extremely strong character that is constantly training with weights. This training makes Obi capable of feats such as lifting railroad tracks with his bare hands, and a level of durability that is so high that it makes his skin nearly impenetrable. It's also worth noting that, while not exactly confirmed, Benimaru suggested that Obi also possesses the power that he refers to as hysterical strength, an ability that only the strongest characters in Fire Force are able to use. Needless to say, Obi's physical strength and durability are practically superhuman, and similar to Captain Haig, Obi also makes full use of Fire Force weapons that are used in day-to-day duties. It's because of this proficiency with weapons that Obi is able to kill Infernals with ease. Combine that with his incredible strength and durability, and not only does Obi easily stop Hibana and Kyoko, but his durability would allow him to tank a hit from Honda before dealing a lethal blow. Against Captain Haig, the fight would be pretty close considering Haig has also demonstrated incredible durability and has a lot of similar skills. That being said, because Obi is younger and clearly stronger, he would probably beat Haig in a drawn-out fight. Now, you would think that Obi would be able to beat Giovanni if he can beat all of these other captains, but when you look at Giovanni's abilities, the fight becomes a lot different. On that note, let's talk about why I have Giovanni as the third strongest captain. Giovanni is currently a white clad, but in the beginning of Fire Force was captain of Company 3, another company closely associated with Hajime Industries. As such, Giovanni is an intelligent scientist whose fighting strategies mainly consist of modifying his own body as much as he can and overwhelming his opponent with tons of different abilities. In the beginning, he had a sort of mechanical body, but following this first form, he modifies his body so that he has the traits of many different bugs, including but not limited to abilities such as super eyesight, sensing emotions, long sharp limbs, mind control, and if you kill him, he can turn into a floating head. Basically, this means that the only way to kill Giovanni is to disrupt the bugs that make up his body with electromagnetism, or completely burning both his body and his head before he can control your mind. So that, combined with his super fast eyes and sharp limbs, means he can beat most of the captains with no problem. Even Obi was never able to beat him, and likely would never be able to beat him since he can't control fire and doesn't have the power to completely destroy Giovanni. That being said, the reason I have Giovanni at number 3 is because he clearly doesn't have the same power as Burns or Benimaru. Plus, while he does have a bunch of crazy abilities, he's never actually beat anyone, not even Arthur or Shinra. So if he can't beat those guys, then he definitely can't beat Burns or Benimaru. Which brings us to the last 2 spots on our list. And this is the difficult part of the discussion because with everyone else, it's fairly easy and there's a clear pecking order, so to speak. In this case, the outcome depends a lot on the particular circumstances of the fight. And let me explain. So, as we all know, Benimaru is often described as the strongest Fire Force soldier, and Burns even said himself that he wouldn't want to fight him. As both a second and third generation pyrokinetic, Benimaru possesses both insane power and an overwhelming arsenal of abilities. He can launch his Matoi at an opponent and ride them as well. He's a master of martial arts, as we can see when he trains Arthur and Shinra. He possesses a number of menacing fire abilities, most notably the Crimson Moon Sun Wheel, and because he's both a second and third generation pyrokinetic, he can control his own flames while simultaneously controlling and stopping the flames of his enemies. We clearly see this in the Obi rescue arc when he stops the abilities of Inka and Haumea. It's this last part that makes Benimaru one of the most terrifying characters on this list, but that isn't to say Burns isn't a monster. Thanks to his ability Voltage Nova, Burns can boost his power, strength, and durability with his own flames. Each new level makes Burns generate hotter flames, meaning he can reach a point where he burns his surroundings and becomes impossible to touch. It should also be mentioned that while he only reached so many levels in the story, it's said that Burns could theoretically reach infinite levels of power. The downside, of course, being that this takes time to build up to. Now, on the one hand, this isn't a problem with most opponents. Burns is able to send characters like Arthur flying in just his base form, and he can also take kicks from Shinra in his base form, meaning he has a higher threshold for damage than most other characters even before he powers up. And in addition to that, it doesn't take long for him to reach new levels. In his fight against Shinra and Joker, it only took Burns a few minutes to reach stage 2, and by the end of the fight he had reached stage 5. When that happened, he had only just reached stage 4, so there was very little time in between stages 4 and 5. Plus, this was a fairly short fight, so the takeaway is that Burns can reach stage 5 and higher towards the end of a short fight and early in any long fights. Now, on the other hand, Burns was defeated by Shinra in stage 5, even if he was deliberately taking all of his attacks. And like I said, it still takes some time for him to reach the higher stages, whereas someone like Benimaru doesn't need that time to use his full power. So in a situation where these two characters are fighting, It's a question of whether Benimaru can beat Burns before he has enough time to reach a high enough stage of Voltage Nova. Because if Burns reaches a high enough stage, then theoretically, he could tank any of Benimaru's attacks, no matter how strong they are. Now, there is the argument that Benimaru could stop Burns from powering up like he stopped Inca and Haumea, but this is something that he would need to do at the very beginning of the fight before Burns is powered up. Otherwise, he would only be putting a small limit on Burns' exponential power. Now, in this case, I think Burns will typically lose to Benimaru as the result of two factors: speed and power. Burns is strong and his Voltage Nova increases all of his physical abilities, but speed isn't one of his strongest traits. Typically, Burns tends to stand still and either counterattacks or tank them, so it's safe to assume that Benimaru would be able to outspeed Burns in one-on-one combat. In addition to that, Benimaru has the higher power output thanks to abilities like Crimson Moon and Crimson Moon's Sunwheel, the latter of which could one-shot his late master's doppelganger in one shot. As a result, I think Benimaru's speed and power output would allow him to beat Burns before he could reach the higher stages of Voltage Nova. That being said, I still think this fight is closer than most people think. Like we mentioned, Burns technically has infinite power, so while he may not be able to beat Benimaru right away, there's a strong chance that he would win in any drawn-out fights. But for all the reasons we listed, it seems pretty clear that Shinmon Benimaru is in fact the strongest captain in Fire Force. But what do you think? Is Burns really the strongest? How would you rank the captains? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And don't forget to become a channel member. You'll get custom emojis and badges, you can pick which series I cover next, and you can get credited in future videos. Also check out my other Fire Force videos, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.